Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Ivy English. I'm Karen.
And I'm Wesley.
Today, it's the middle of the month. It's April 15th, and we're on page 43 in your magazines. And please prepare yourself a bit because this article is going to make me sad. You may hear it in my voice.
好，今天这篇文章呢，Karen 老师他读的就蛮难过的哈。那我想其实这个只要是美国人读到这一段，应该都会觉得蛮难过的。
If you know anything about the history, and because I didn't really learn that much about the Civil War in school, I don't blame my school for it. I just wasn't really interested in history. And what you learn in school is usually just a very simplified version. I just didn't know that much about the Civil War. But that has been so decisive in the following development of the country, the subsequent development of our country. So many things go back to the Civil War. And if you don't understand what happened there, it's really hard to understand America at all.
美国的内战啊，其实对美国有很深远、很强烈的影响啊。所以现在美国的很多你说问题也好，或者一些现象也好，其实你如果追根究底的话，其实都是在内战时那一段期间啊所留下来的一些影响。那当然内战也是之前的美国政治社会发展的最后的得到的结果哈。所以总之呢，如果你真的想要了解美国的话，美国内战你是一定要去了解的。
That's right. And who is often cited as the worst president we ever had?
好，那美国一般大家讲说美国最糟糕的总统是谁呢
？Many people say it was Buchanan, who was president right before Lincoln. His name was Buchanan.
好，很多人说就是林肯之前的那一位总统。
Because he's the one who is trying to kind of keep the South happy, and he was not standing up to the South. He kept making compromises and concessions to the South. He was not solving the problem. He said, well, this is not my responsibility. Somebody else will take care of it. He is commonly cited as the absolutely... No, you were probably thinking of somebody else when I asked that question. But Buchanan is often cited as the very worst president we ever had. And he was really responsible, I think, for us ending up in an internal war and a civil war because he just did not take any action.
那因为这位总统呢，他对于当时美国国内的很严重的问题，他完全没有去处理他就一直推卸，然后呢，这个甚至于想要讨好，试着讨好各方讨好，那最后就什么都做不好。
That's right. And how did I find out about this? It's because I realized I just didn't understand enough about this really, really important period and event in American history. So I listened to a 10-volume audiobook, which was about Lincoln's life, written by his secretaries. So they experienced it firsthand. 这是第一手的资料。They had the original documents. They knew Lincoln personally. So it's highly credible. Of course, they favor the North, of course. But I listened to all 10 volumes, and that was really worthwhile.
所以这个 Karen 老师他这个听过这个10集的关于林肯的实测的这个关于林肯的这个
biography
生平那我想而且是由他的 secretary 他的一些他底下两个这个 secretaries 两个秘书根据他们亲身经验还有一些史料写出来的，所以非常能够让你了解到林肯这样的一个人，还有对于当时的美国你有更好的了解。好，所以我想难怪 Karen 看到这篇短短的一篇讲到这个林肯的事情的时候，他会觉得很难过。
Yeah, I feel a strong resonance with it. Well, that's enough introduction, just so you're prepared for what's coming. You'll probably hear kind of my voice shaking or something like that. Seriously. So our title today is The Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. The title is enough to make you sad.
Yeah, 好，那这个中文的标题是美国总统林肯遇刺案。好，那 assassination 就是刺杀的意思。
Right. Okay, here's our article.Of the 46 U.S. presidents, few are as well known as Abraham Lincoln. Elected to office twice, in 1860 and 1864, Lincoln served as the country's commander-in-chief during the Civil War. He is remembered for issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves in the Confederacy were free, and for giving the Gettysburg Address, possibly one of the most familiar presidential speeches.Unfortunately, his second term in office was cut short when he was assassinated on April 14, 1865. Lincoln's assassin was John Wilkes Booth. Booth was born in Maryland and remained in the North during the war, but supported the Confederacy. He had been involved in a plot a month earlier, which included kidnapping Lincoln and taking him to Virginia. This plan failed, and shortly after, the war ended with General Lee's surrender on April 9th. Then on April 14th, Booth was informed that Lincoln and his wife would be at Ford's Theater to watch the play Our American Cousin. Booth slipped into the president's theater box and fired a shot into his head. He then leapt down to the stage, breaking his leg in the process, and shouted, Sic semper tyrannis, thus ever to tyrants, Virginia's state motto. Booth fled, and Lincoln was moved across the street to a boarding house where he was attended to by doctors. The next morning, around 7:30, Lincoln was pronounced dead. In the meantime, 10,000 federal troops, detectives, and police worked to track down Booth. On April 26th, Union troops descended on and surrounded a barn in Virginia where Booth and an accomplice were hiding. Eventually, Booth was shot and died several hours later. Wow, reliving a very, very painful piece of American history. Back to the beginning, we've already translated that, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. Watch pronunciation and watch spelling. Assassination has got two donkeys in it. A-S-S, A-S-S. Yeah, it's got two donkeys in it. Remember it? And you remember it's double S twice. And Abraham, I've heard Taiwanese say Abraham or something like that. It's Abraham Lincoln, and we don't pronounce the L.
所以呢，这个各位注意这些发音哈。那 Abraham Lincoln 那个后面那个 C-O-L-N 那个 L 是不发音的哈。那还有 assassination， 刚刚 Karen 老师讲这个字呢，里面有两只驴哈，因为驴的英文是 A-S-S 好，所以 assassination 是 A-S-S-A-S-S 好，所以有两只驴在里面，这样你永远不会忘记这个字的这个拼法了。
One of the biggest spelling problems we native speakers have is it a double letter or single letter? 一个 S 两个 S, we often don't know.
Yeah, 好，所以这个对于母语人士来讲呢，因为发音上面一个 S 两个 S 听起来都是同一个声音
Usually.
通常了哈，所以他们常常会搞不清楚，这到底拼的时候是一个 S 还是两个 S 啊？那像
一个 N 两个 N
搞不太清楚哈。那在这里呢，所以这个字很好帮你记啊，你可以记得里面有两只驴。Yeah.
Okay, here's our first sentence. Of the 46 U.S. presidents, few are as well known as Abraham Lincoln.
好 of 就是在什么什么之中的意思哈，在46位的美国总统当中呢 few 就是非常少，几乎没有哈，是怎么样呢？是各位注意 few 后面还是接复数动词 are 哈 few are， 然后 as well known as 很少有人跟林肯总统一样啊这么的为人所知。
Okay, elected to office twice, in 1860 and 1864, Lincoln served as the country's commander-in-chief during the Civil War.
好，那这个一开始又是个分词构句，它省略了 being 哈 ，being elected to office， 所以他被选上当选啊两次，他当选过两次美国总统，在1860年跟1864年啊，然后呢。主要子句现在才出来 Lincoln served as 就是他担任这个国家的 Commander-in-Chief 就是总司令在这个内战期间他担任总司令
One thing that you should know for sure is that the Civil War was about one thing 就是黑奴奴隶制度的存废That's what it was about. You will find a lot of people, especially from the South, who still deny it. And one person I met who's really well-educated, really smart, I think from Texas, he also denied. He says, no, it wasn't about slavery. It was about self-determination, about 自觉, about keeping the right to decide on your own affairs. But for us, we hear that as a euphemism, 这是个委婉语, about having the right to preserve slavery.
好，所以呢，这个美国的内战呢，当然有很重要的这个议题，就是奴隶的问题。
I would say 核心。
那它的核心哈，那但是有一些人啊，例如说很多美国南方的人啊，例如说刚刚 Karen 老师讲，他遇到这个受过良好教育而且很聪明的南方人，他们会有的人还是觉得说，这个是关于自觉的这种权利，就是我们有没有权利来决定我们自己要。做什么决定自己的这个制度啊，这样的一个问题啊。不过我想大家现在一般世界上公认啊，就是美国的内战是最重要的一个核心问题，就是 奴隶的问题。
So the person who became president next after this very ineffectual president, James Buchanan, he had really two choices to choose from. Number one is you let the South break off and become independent, a country by itself, and they can keep slavery, which was their goal. Or do you force them to remain part of the Union and have to give up slavery? That was the issue of the war.
好，所以林肯面对的问题就是他有两条路可以走，一条路就是让南方继续保有他们的奴隶制度，那最后呢，
然后宣布独立，
而且会宣布独立啊。那另外一个问题啊，另外一条路呢，就是这个让南方接受这个废除奴隶制度这样的一个，而且是强迫他们接受。
That's right, and he knew he would have to pay a high price, and the price was enormous.
啊，那他当然知道他必须要付出很大的代价，而且这个代价非常的大。
In human life, in injuries, in animals, so many animals died in the war.
啊，所以这个美国内战呢，不但很多人死亡，而且很多动物都死亡。
All right, next sentence. He is remembered for issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared that all slaves in the Confederacy were free, and for giving the Gettysburg Address, possibly one of the most familiar presidential speeches. Both of these are important, but about the second point, I will just say very quickly. One reason it is so famous and successful is because it was short. His vice president or other people, not the vice president, somebody else was lecturing like for 2 hours or more in their speech. Nobody remembers that speech, but this speech was very short and everybody remembers it.
好，所以盖茨堡这个演说呢，有一个很重要的，他能够这么有名的原因，就是因为它很短啊。那当时那个场合上面还有其他人演说，可能讲了2个小时怎么样，那大家都忘了他在讲什么了。但是一个好的演说不用太长，短短的可以流传千古，像这是一个很好的例子。好，那我们看到这个句子，他说 he is remembered for， 他以什么为人所记得呢？以他 issuing 他颁布叫 issue， 在这里是颁布。好，他颁布的解放奴隶宣言这个很重要的一个宣言，因为这是人类的价值嘛，自由还有人权，这是人类的价值。那 which declared that 在这个宣言里面呢，他宣布all slaves in the Confederacy， 就是联邦在联邦里面，这其实 Confederacy 在这里就指的是南方的南方的那个联盟呢，里面所有的奴隶were free， 他们都是自由人。然后呢 for 这个 for 一样是 remembered for， he is remembered for two things， 一个是 issuing这个解放奴隶的这个宣言，另外一个是 and for giving， 他发表了Given 在这里发表，因为他受词是 address， 他发表了盖茨堡的演说。好，然后这盖茨堡演说呢，同也可以告诉你，他 possibly 可能是 one of the most familiar presidential speeches， 他可能是总统演讲里面大家最熟的这个演讲之一说不定我觉得应该称他是大家最熟的一个总统演讲，应该不为过了。
That's right. Yeah. And in Taiwan, you have a Lincoln Society, and they have a speech contest every year where students are asked to deliver the Gettysburg Address. So I helped many students over the years prepare for that.
台湾呢有一个这个林肯应该是协会吧，中文那他每年举办这个盖茨堡演说的这样的演讲比赛Karen 老师训练过很多学生去参加过这样的一个演讲比赛。
Next sentence. Unfortunately, his second term in office was cut short when he was assassinated on April 14th, 1865. And this is a great collocation. His second term, we already know they're going to say was cut short. That's exactly the phrasal verb we need here.
好，那这个地方呢，当你读到 his second term， 他第二这个任期呢，后面大概就预期可能就 was cut short， 这是很常见的一个 collocation 那这个 term 就指任期。那这里为什么他再加一个 in office 呢？第一个让他清楚第二个这个在 rhythm 的关系这个你也可以说 his second term was cut short 也可以那加个 in office 就更明确的说他是任期，所以他第二任的任期呢被提早结束 was cut short。那 when he was assassinated， 当他被刺杀在这个1865年的4月14日。
Lincoln's assassin was John Wilkes Booth.
好，那这个句子简单有力
Booth was born in Maryland and remained in the North during the war, but supported the Confederacy.
好，那他出生在马里兰州那他是而且 remained 他一直留在这个北方 during the war， 所以在南北战争期间呢，他是一直是住在北边的。
Right, but Maryland is actually a border state. You're already getting into the South in Maryland.
所以 Maryland 它是个 border state 就它是大概在美国所谓南北战争呢，它大概在中间所以已经接近有一部分，它其实可以算是有一点算在南方了。
That's right.
Yeah.
He had been involved in a plot a month earlier, which included kidnapping Lincoln and taking him to Virginia.
好，那 he had been 这个是在过去的过去那所以在他刺杀这个美国在林肯总统之前呢，他 had been involved in 他牵涉到一个 plot 一般学文学的人看到 plot 大概就指那是情节但在这里这个 plot 是个 secret plan 是个密谋a scheme A 的那 scheme 的 SCHEME scheme 所以他涉及一个密谋是在这个 a month earlier， 在他刺杀林肯总统之前1个月，他已经涉及一个密谋。那注意到这个 earlier 这个字它指过去的过去，这里不能用 ago ago 是指从现在的过去所以如果说 a month ago 是指今天之前的1个月，但在这个地方它是过去式，整个都是讲过去的事情，所以它这里只能用 earlier 所以 a month earlier 就是这个1个月之前他已经涉及了一个密谋。那这个密谋什么 which included 这个密谋牵涉到什么呢？他要 kidnapping， 他本来是想要绑架林肯，然后呢 taking him to Virginia 他们异想天开，觉得我把你这个总司令抓起来，把你绑架到维吉尼亚州，你这个仗就打不下去了，就输定了。
Right, and 涉及 is a really good translation of involved in. You could say participated in, 有参与, but that would imply a more active role. 涉及 means we're not clear about exactly what kind of a role you played.
好，那这个地方你也可以说he had participated in， 但是那就是参与那跟中文 participated in 就是中文讲参与，那他跟 being involved in 涉及之间的关系，中文也很清楚，他参与的跟他涉及的其实不太一样，参与的是非常的 active 就是他真的有进去去干嘛，去这个做实际上去做了很多事情。那涉及的话呢，他到底是做了什么，其实我们不确定。
We just know he's a 相关人物。
Yeah,
This plan failed, and shortly after, the war ended with General Lee's surrender on April 9th.
好，那这个计划呢失败了，而且 shortly after 这个没多久之后没多久这个战争呢就南北战争就 ended 就结束了因为李将军他在4月9日他 surrender， 他这个 surrender 是名词他投降了。那这个 General Lee 也是一个很了不起的人物所以这个也是受到很多人的尊敬
Yeah, of course we criticize him because he was on the wrong side.
Yeah.
But he was a very talented general. And the South had much fewer resources, or many fewer resources than the North. The North had a lot more resources, more people, more money, better equipment, better training. The South, it was just kind of thrown together.
Yeah.
And they treated their soldiers really badly, and they treated prisoners of war really badly. They made their own money, and the money looked like play money. I mean, just everything about the South was kind of like play acting.
所以当时呢的南北战争的时候，南方的资源非常的匮乏这个各方面都比不过北方那大概是因为我受到我看的那个电影的影响了那个 General Lee 好像本来是在北边嘛，但是开战之后他觉得他必须要回到南边去
That's right.
他也知道南边大概不太容易打赢，但是他还是决定他的 loyalty 这决定对他的家乡要有 loyalty.
But he was on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Okay, then on April 14th, Booth was informed that Lincoln and his wife would be at Ford's Theater to watch the play Our American Cousin.
然后呢，在4月14日 Booth was informed that 就是他被告知林肯跟他的夫人呢将会在这个剧院要看这个 play Our American Cousin.Booth
slipped into the president's theater box and fired a shot into his head.
好，各位注意，这个里面呢有很多中文完全一样的说法。他溜进这个总统的剧院包厢，这个溜进英文就 slipped into 他溜进去他的这个包厢，然后呢 fired a shot into his head 就是对着他的脑袋开了一枪fired a shot 就是开了一枪然后这个打进他的总统的脑袋里面。
He then leapt onto the stage, breaking his leg in the process, and shouted, Sic semper tyrannis, thus ever to tyrants, Virginia's state motto.
好，他接下来的 leapt 就是跳跃哈 ，leap leapt leapt， 也有人说 leap leaped 都可以哈，就加 ed 或者变成 t 都可以。他往下跳到了舞台上面啊，然后呢，在过程当中 in the process， 他腿断掉了，因为各位想，他从2楼跳到舞台上面去。
And he was also really panicked, really nervous.
那他也非常的紧张，因为这个刺杀嘛，很怕被抓到。然后他就大喊着啊，那这个是拉丁文，那他的英文就是 thus ever to tyrants， 他的这个 ever 就是 always 的意思啊，所以这个意思这就是暴君的下场啊，所以在他眼中林肯是个暴君啊，所以这就是暴君的下场。然后呢，这个也是 Virginia 他的州的 motto 就是箴言哈，或者一个座右铭呀。
Last paragraph, Booth fled and Lincoln was moved across the street to a boarding house where he was attended to by doctors.
Fled 就是 flee 的过去式 F-L-E-E 哈，他逃跑了，所以 Booth 跑掉了，然后林肯被移到 across the street 啊，移到这个剧院的对街啊，到一个 boarding house 就是一个提供食宿的一个房子哈，你付钱你就可以在那里吃可以住啊。他到那个 boarding house， 在那里呢 he was attended to 他被照料 by doctors 由医生来照料他。
Okay. The next morning around 7:30, Lincoln was pronounced dead.
好，那第二天早上大概7点半的时候呢，林肯被宣布死亡。好 ，was pronounced dead， 这也是常见的 collocation， 就是被宣布死亡。pronounce 就是宣布。
In the meantime, 10,000 federal troops, detectives, and police worked to track down Booth.
好 ，in the meantime， 同时啊，有10000名联邦的 troops 就是军队啊 ，detectives 侦探。还有警察 worked to 他们都努力的工作要干嘛呢？他们在努力的要 track down 要追捕 Booth.
Right, and detective can also be 警探, right?
要警探呀。
On April 26th, Union troops descended on and surrounded a barn in Virginia where Booth and an accomplice were hiding.
好，所以在4月26日的时候呢，这个联邦的这个部队好 descend on 就是 to arrive 啊，或者是 attack in a sudden or overwhelming manner， 就是突然之间到了，而且感觉起来是大量的，让你无法抵抗啊，好像整个人扑向你那种感觉啊，所以大量的部队到达，然后包围了维吉尼亚的一个 barn 一个这个谷仓。那在这里呢 Booth 还有他的一个 accomplice 就是一个共犯啊，躲在那个地方。
Eventually, Booth was shot and died several hours later.
Eventually, in the end, 到最后呢 Booth 他中弹啊，然后呢这个 died several hours later 几个小时之后呢他就死亡了。好，那个时候枪弹除非打到要害，不然的话不会让你马上死掉。那个时候枪弹还比较传统的枪弹。
传统 yeah.
Yeah.When
you read these stories, you think about why did these presidents not protect themselves better? And then you think of Kennedy's assassination.
Yeah.
He had thought about security problems. He says, no, I want to be close to the people. So he went out to the people in a convertible with a completely open top.
这甘乃迪总统遇刺的时候，他是希望亲近民众，所以他坐在敞篷车里面。啊，因为你碰到这种事，你就觉得说，哎呀，你为什么我们没有好好的保护啊这2位这么好的总统呢？
They had thought of it beforehand.
他们事先有想到，但是实在是啊，有的时候啊，这个国家的命运吧，历史的走向吧。
In fact, Lincoln had taken a lot of other risks before then, and walking to the White House and things, he often did not have people protecting him. He had a kind of confidence, I guess.
啊，那林肯事实上之前有很多次，他在公共场合出没的时候，出现的时候，他没有好好的保护自己，因为他觉得他有信心，他的人民不会怎样。
And that's it for today. You should read more about this period of history. It will not disappoint. It's really exciting. Okay, that's it for today. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.